Hello, my name is David Gross, and I'm president of the San Antonio Symphony. I'm here today with Maestro Gerard Schwarz, who is the Symphony's guest conductor for this weekend's concert, which is the third week of the Symphony's Mozart Festival. Welcome, Maestro Schwarz.
David, nice to be with you. Thank you.
Good to be with you. First time conducting in San Antonio.
Not only the first time conducting in San Antonio, the first time being in San Antonio.
And your thoughts about our city?
Well, it's a great city, as everybody here knows. It's beautiful. It has a great cultural center, beautiful acoustics and beautiful looking, a great symphony orchestra. For me, every city is identified not just by their basketball team, even though you guys have a great one, but they're identified by a cultural institution. Mm-hmm. And to have a great symphony orchestra is something very special. And we're very lucky. You're very lucky to have such a great orchestra.
Well, thank you. You just came from your first rehearsal. Any thoughts? The Tobin Center, and you mentioned about
Well,
our
as
orchestra.
I said, the acoustics are gorgeous. The attitude of the orchestra is sensational. They're wonderful people who care deeply about music, want to make great concerts, and obviously they enjoy their work. And every workplace, there's some workplaces are negative, some are positives, whether they're orchestras or in an assembly line and making automobiles. It's a very positive atmosphere. It comes from you and your music director, and you should be very proud.
Thank you. This weekend's concerts are part of our Mozart Festival, as you're aware, and I believe you're familiar with the festival format. I think that you've curated many festivals. What benefits or opportunities do you see with the Symphony Orchestra and Arts Organization presenting a festival to bring in more people?
Well, I'm not sure that the purpose is to bring in more people. I mean, yes, it will, but if you do a festival around Mozart, it gives everyone, the musicians, the audience, to delve more deeply into this great composer. Mozart is on everyone's list of the 2 or 3 greatest composers in the world, with Bach and Beethoven and Brahms, or whomever you particularly like, but Mozart's always there. And to be able to look a little deeper into seeing who he was, mm-hmm. what he wrote, who he influenced. I mean, for example, in this week's program, we're doing a post-horn symphony, a wonderful little symphony that he wrote when he was, I think, 23 or 24. And we're also doing the Rococo variations of Tchaikovsky. Mm-hmm. The Rococo variations are a reflection on the classical period. Even though Tchaikovsky was a great romantic, this particular work is looking back. And it's nice to include pieces like that and to look at Mozart and to see how he's influenced just about every composer that came after him.
You've enjoyed a very impressive career as a conductor, including 26 years as music director of the Seattle Symphony. What do you find the most rewarding conducting as opposed to other things that you do in your musical life?
Well, the great thing about being a conductor is you get to immerse yourself in great music. Mm-hmm. What a thrill. You go on the stage, and here I give a sign. But nothing, you're supposed to sing it. Nothing happens. You go up there and there's an orchestra in front of you, give a sign, and beautiful music comes out. What could be more wonderful? Yeah. It's just a thrill to be a part of this great world of great music. And for me, to be a part of it since I was a young boy. I became a professional musician playing for the first time as an extra with the New York Philharmonic when I was 16. Mm-hmm. And so I was a trumpet player in my youth. And then growing up and then becoming a conductor and spending all the last 40 years immersing myself in the great music. And take a composer like Mozart. For 20 years, I was lucky enough to run the Mozart Festival at Lincoln Center. So a lot of Mozart's gone through my fingers, and it's a joy to be part of that world.
How do you lead a group of musicians and they have a very specific, their own idea about how something should go? So you have 80 musicians there with pretty strong ideas. And how do you pull that all together to a unified vision for a piece of music or an entire concert?
That's, as you know, that's the job of the conductor. Right. But in fact, you're right. I mean, you can imagine you have 80 players, all who are highly educated, mm-hmm. all who have practiced for hours and hours and hours on their instrument, have reached a certain level of proficiency or excellence, let's say. And then the conductor's job is to try to inspire them to do their best, to make it easy for them to do their best, to hopefully have them enjoy the experience. And then, to a certain extent, you're imposing your musical will on them, but mm-hmm. they're also giving you their ideas. It's a give and take. So you conduct something and you hear someone play, you know, oh, that's interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way. And if it's good, leave it alone. With the string section, where you have this, you know, you have 14 people playing the same part, you actually have to be a little more of a guide, and they have to be willing. If they're willing to be part of a whole, then it's sensational. If they feel like they'd rather be a soloist or playing concertos, then it's not so successful. An orchestra like yours, the string players are sensational. They're individually excellent, and as a group, they play wonderfully together.
Does the idea of unifying that vision, does it become more difficult in a guest conducting spot as opposed to when you're working in a, let's say, as a music director and you're working with those musicians on a regular basis?
It goes both ways.
Yeah.
The easier part is you come in, you try to make music. You try to make music on a high level as you can. Interpretive ideas. It's like saying a sentence. If you said, David, it's so great to see you. Well, I'd rather have you say it, David, it's so great to see you. Or, David, it's so great to see you. Now, the composers give us an idea of how that sentence should go. Mozart doesn't give us many ideas. Right. He leaves it to us. You come in as a guest conductor, your primary job is to make music. It's not to fix all, if there are any issues or problems, which in this orchestra that happen not to be, but that's not your issue. Your issue is to spend a week and make sure everyone is focused on making a great concert.
You have a special appreciation or understanding of the musicians in the orchestra, because you mentioned briefly that you spent a portion of your career as co-principal trumpet of the New York Philharmonic. Could you tell us a little bit about that transition from being a musician in the orchestra to then getting up and being in front of the orchestra?
So I thought you were going to say being a musician to
and then being a conductor.
No. Hopefully we conductors are still musicians. Yes. You know, it's very interesting. So as the first trumpet, you're in a leadership position. So you lead. What's interesting is you follow the conductor, and then sometimes people aren't sure what the conductor's doing, or he's making a mistake, and you have to kind of lead. So it's your job to lead, and it's in a way. And the personality of the trumpet player is like that. He's the quarterback in a way, you know, like the concertmaster is. For me, being in that role in the New York Philharmonic was the dream of my life. From the time I was a little boy, I wanted to do that. And here I was, 24. I got that job, my teacher's job. You know, wow, what a thrill! And I loved it, and I loved playing the orchestra. But I also looked up at the conductor and I said, you know, I think that I could make maybe a more important musical contribution as the conductor. And so when I left the orchestra and quit playing, you know, all my friends said, why would you quit being one of the greatest trumpet players in the world to being a lousy conductor? Of course, my answer was, I hope I'm not a lousy conductor. But the transition is a very difficult one, even though if you look at my life now, all those years later, it seemed pretty simple, right? I got a whole bunch of positions right away. The Los Angeles Chamber Orchestra, the New York Chamber Symphony, mostly Mozart Festival, a few years later the Seattle Symphony, the Waterloo Festival, the Great Mountains Festival, just huge amount of opportunities. When I was doing it, weeks would go by, we had nothing to do, or months, it was a little scary, but luckily it worked out for me.
It must have been a real dream come true growing up in New York, and then, that's every musician's dream to be able to, especially if you're in a major city, to play in your hometown orchestra.
And that was my hometown orchestra.
Yeah.
Leonard Bernstein was my conductor. My teacher's name was William Vacchiano.
Yep.
He was, for me, the greatest trumpet player in the world, and I just loved him, and I loved studying with him. I went to performing arts, public high school in New York, then I went to Juilliard. But by the time I was going to Juilliard, I was already playing professionally all over the world as a member of the American Brass Quintet. I was lucky, but I actually did play well. I can say that now because I haven't played in 40 years, so I can say I played very well. But yeah, it was a dream come true. And I don't know if people understand what it's like. It's some people know baseball players, right? They know their batting average for every year. They know what their win and loss percentages as a pitcher. We in this world, I knew the way everybody played. Every orchestra, most orchestras. Yeah. I could hear an orchestra, whether it be American or European, and pretty much always be correct in guessing who it was. Now it's a little harder now. It's a little more homogeneous now. But when I was a kid, you could always tell. And and it was like following the stars. And we in high school, we would just look up to these people the way people who love actors or love tennis players follow them.
You had a special inspiration, I would say, at 24 years old, working with Leonard Bernstein. I would think that would be.
It was
special.
thrilling because, of course, my experience with Bernstein was I was a subscriber to the New York Philharmonic when I was still in high school because you couldn't get tickets. They were always sold out. So I'd be as a subscriber, I sat in the last row of, in those days, Philharmonic Hall, and Bernstein was there, this little person, and then he was on television, right, because he did the young people's concerts. So all of a sudden, there he was. And then all of a sudden, we're on an airplane together, going to Australia to play a big Mahler symphony, the Mahler Fifth Symphony, and we were having a drink together. That's Leonard Bernstein. I mean, it was shocking to me. The biggest thing was he was such a great artist and such an extraordinary personality. I mean, he just was second to none, as far as I'm concerned, in terms of charisma and being able to command attention. Extraordinary.
When we met yesterday, I reminded you that we actually performed together. We probably shouldn't say how many years ago it was.
In Kansas City.
In Kansas City,
when
yes.
you were the sensational timpanist.
Oh, thank you.
Really sensational.
Thank you. And we both remembered the repertoire, so I don't know what that says about our memory, or
Isn't that something?
It's kind of weird.
Because when you mentioned that I was there, I was starting to roll off the pieces I did. Then you started to, wow, I didn't think people had memories like that, except me.
Yeah. This week's guest artist, there's an interesting dynamic between the two of you. Our cellist is your son.
My son Julian. Whenever I get a chance to work with my son, it's a thrill. I'm his father, okay, but he is one of the greatest cellists in the world, I think. And as a conductor, I would never want to work with someone who wasn't great, because it's my concert after all.
Right.
And this kid's really something. He turned 26 last week, and he's teaching at Juilliard at Joel Krosnick's assistant, and he's an extraordinary young man. And for me, to work with him is just, I remember the first time I worked with him, he was doing the Dvorak concerto with me. I'm not sure exactly, Hartford or someplace like that. And after the first show, he was mad at me. I said, Julian, why are you mad at me? He said, Dad, you shouldn't call me son in front of the orchestra. I'm very sensitive.
I was going to ask you, how do you, any sort of artistic disagreements, how does that get resolved? Is the dynamic of father-son get in there, or is it all?
No, we rarely have a musical disagreement, but I approach him as I would any young artist. Yeah. I will give him my opinion, and if he adjusts, great. If he doesn't, fine. With older artists, I may give my opinion as well, but I'm, let's say, a little more demure about it.
Sure.
And but we almost never have any issues.
Your professional life is very diverse. You conduct, compose. Can you talk a little bit about your compositions and your arranging that you've done?
Sure. When I was a young boy, my parents were from Austria, from Vienna, and they're both medical doctors. And when I was 12, I told my father that I wanted to become a musician. Not so hot, a young Jewish boy in New York who wants to be a musician, not a doctor like his parents. And so after he thought about it, he said, okay, if you want to be a musician, you're going to have to be a well-educated one. Mm-hmm. So I was writing music then, 12, 13. He said, I'm going to get you a composition teacher. Mm-hmm. So he got me a teacher named Paul Creston, who was, especially in the 50s, 60s, a very famous, he's one of the few Americans that Toscanini played. So I studied with Creston all my high school years. Mm-hmm. And then when I went to Juilliard, I had some other great teachers, Roger Sessions and Vincent Persichetti and Jacob Druckmann and Milton Babbitt. And I studied a little bit with Boulez as well. Mm-hmm. So I did a lot of composing, and I loved it. I wasn't great about the time you're isolated on your own. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm a gregarious person. I like people. I don't like to sit in a room hour after hour writing, and so I let it go. By the time I was in my mid-20s, I stopped writing. Then I started writing again about 10 years ago, and of course, you're older, and actually having a little time in a room all by myself wasn't so bad anymore. I kind of liked it. So I started writing, and the great thing about writing when you're not a composer is that you don't care. and you don't care about what people are going to say. Someone going to say, oh, it's too conventional. Oh, it sounds too much like Richard Strauss.
Right.
Oh, it's this. It's not a problem for me, because my main life is that of a conductor.
Sure.
And so I write what I think, what I would like to hear, what I think an audience would like to hear. It's not movie music, you know, it's not pablum, but it's certainly not avant-garde at all. And quite frankly, I've had a lot of success. Everything I've written, people have really liked, and if they didn't, I'd be unhappy. I wish they would, but it wouldn't be so terrible. And I love doing arrangements. So I do opera arrangement. I did an opera suite from Rosenkavalier arrangement. I did arrangement from Pelléas and Melisande. I did one from Hansel and Gretel. Just, well, I could say this morning or yesterday, I finished a piece for Nadja Slano-Sonnenberg, the great violinist, who has an orchestra in San Francisco called the New Century Strings, and this is her last year. And she said, would I arrange the famous Gymnopédie of Eric Satie for solo violin and strings, which I finished yesterday, sent it to the copyist. This morning, I studied the score, made sure there were no mistakes, and I sent it to her. So I'm busy all the time, and it's really fun, and it's fun for me. And I mean, I'll tell you a story. I was sitting with a composer, good composer, and piece was going along really great. I said, wow, I'm looking at the score, and then all of a sudden there's this bar with a few like wrong notes. You know, I said, why is this here? He said, well, I have to write something for the critics. And I thought to myself, thank goodness I don't have to do that.
I understand that you're assembling kind of a cross-section of your discography right now, and it's going to be released soon for the public to purchase. Yes,
this is, we talk about anniversaries.
Yes.
So if there's an anniversary of, in 1970, the anniversary of Beethoven's birth.
Okay.
Do we need a celebration of Beethoven? No.
No.
I mean, quite frankly, he gets a lot of play. He's okay.
Right.
You know, if you wanted to do a anniversary of the birth of Edgar Varese, that would be, whether it be
different,
successful or not,
right,
it to be interesting.
Right.
So this year I'm turning 70, and so as I'm turning 70, I said, hey, I'll take advantage of that. I'll try. So I did a couple of things. I wrote a book, a memoir, which is coming out in March, and you know, I think you'll find it interesting. I'm not sure. I mean, I think most people find it interesting until it gets to the part about all the repertoire. Then you can skip those chapters and move on. And I have a record company I work with called Naxos, which is the largest classical music record company in the world. And they said that they'd like to bring together a 30 CD box of my life as a recording artist, let's say, which goes back more than 50 years. So I started making my first records when I was 18. And so I've assembled 30 CDs of records I've made since I was 18 until now. So there are about, probably 18 CDs of stuff that doesn't exist.
Wow.
And then there are 5 CDs of some of the trumpet recordings from the old days. And then I have about 10 CDs of my favorite, or 12 CDs of my favorite recordings from Naxos. So for me, it's very exciting.
I was going to say, it must have been fun to kind of look back over. I mean, it's quite a legacy.
It's really been fun, and I finally have all the CDs to come out. My birthday's in August. This will come out either August or September, and I'm writing the program notes now.
Oh, wow.
And the program notes are not going to be, you know, they're 4 Brahms symphonies. It's not going to be about what year, it's going to be about why these pieces are important to me, to society, to civilization, what memories I have of making those recordings, very personal ways. So I've been very excited writing that.
That's great. And of course, for a conductor, 70 is not old.
Thank goodness.
Yes. So to that, what is in store for the next chapter of Gerard Schwarz's career?
Wow. Well, I don't know. I mean, I've gotten now up until September. I'm still doing all the same stuff. I'm doing my guest conducting. I do all my all-star stuff and all my educational things, and my guest conducting. I'm having a phenomenal time.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Maestro Schwarz, thank you so much for joining us.
Great pleasure to be with you, David. Thank you.
Look forward to this weekend's concerts.
So do I.
For more information about this weekend's concerts, please visit tobincenter.org or sasymphony.org.